Welcome to the Escape the System channel. I'm Joe Barnes, the author of the books Escape the System and The Rebel Code. Now in today's video, I'm back with another tier list. A couple of weeks ago, I made my first one. This was reviewing 15 of the best-selling, most popular self-help books of all time and grading them according to the tier list. At the time, I said there was more to review, more to grade, but I didn't want to do them all in one go because it would have created one giant video. So I'm back here today with another 15 super popular self-help books. A couple of lesser known titles sprinkled in here and there as well. And my intention of doing this is, number one, just to have a little bit of fun, but number two, to introduce you guys to maybe some new books that you haven't read, to give you an idea of what they're like, and also getting a picture in my mind, in your mind, of what really is the best self-help book out there. Also, stay to the very end of the video where I've got a little surprise for you. I'm going to then grade my 4 books and see where they end up on the tier list. So let's begin. This is done in alphabetical order, and you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, I have Becoming Supernatural, and this is from Joe Dispenza. It's a little difficult to grade this one, to find a place on the tier list for this book, because I really like Joe Dispenza. I've seen him interviewed a few times. I love his knowledge. I love the approach he brings. He deals with the law of attraction, but he brings a more scientific approach to it and explains it incredibly well. However, this book wasn't, for me, the most entertaining of reads. Because he takes a slightly more scientific approach to the law of attraction, the book is full of pictures, graphs, scientific explanations, and I just think it ruins the flow of the book. For a self-help book, I like to be inspired. Yes, I like to learn new insights. I like to occasionally read about scientific research or hear that those insights are backed by scientific research, but he went to such lengths to promote this scientific research that the book became a little boring and disjointed. So that's on the negative side. The positive side are the experiments are interesting, even if there are a little too many of them. The concepts are great. It's generally well explained, but it's a little bit too long-winded. So I could have this book put on the tier list anywhere between A, B, and C. So I guess I've just got to go with B. Part of me thinks it should almost go down to C because the reading experience wasn't that enjoyable. Okay, moving on to Be Useful, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Probably the most recently released book on this list. And it's a good book, full of interesting examples. I'm a huge Arnold fan. He's one of my main inspirations throughout my life. And because of that, I've already read his autobiography. I've already listened to many interviews with him, done a lot of research into him. So I know most of his story. Now he has, the book is called Be Useful, 7 Tools for Life. So there are 7 essential tools that Arnold has used to navigate his way through life and create this incredibly successful existence. And he shares them with you. As an Arnold fan though, I was left feeling like I pretty much knew most of this. You know, if you've listened to his 6 Rules for Success speech, if you've read his previous book, it's not hugely new material. There are some new insights, which is good, but he's just reordering it. So for me, I'm going to go with B. If you've never come across Arnold and think you might be interested in him, that could be an A for you. Right, moving on to Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Excellent book. This is a real contender for the S, between the S and the A tier. I'm undecided, so I'm going to talk it through now. Brilliant story. He reflects on his incredible life story of being an abused child, being hugely overweight teenager, giving up on his dreams of joining the military, and then deciding after being a cockroach exterminator that he has to go for it. Loses 100 pounds in a ridiculously short amount of time, something like 90 days. I don't know if my numbers are completely accurate there, but he does something incredible to get through into the military, and then goes in for Navy SEAL training, which sounds like one of the toughest things on earth. And then you hear about his life as an extreme runner. So at the end of each chapter, he draws a lesson from his experiences. So it's basically a memoir, but at the end of each chapter, you get a small teaching insight. His voice is really good. It comes through in the book, and it's gripping. It keeps you wanting to read more. The insights are good, but ultimately they're a little bit one-dimensional. I mean, it can all pretty much be summed up by the fact that what he calls the 40% rule. And basically, this is that when you think that you've given everything you have to something, say you're out on a run or you're doing some work, you're only at 40%. You've got 60% left. And that's a great thing to know. And it's an inspiring concept. But there are other insights there, but there wasn't much beyond that. It was just more the power of his story. So because of that, I'm going to go with the A tier, but understand that that's knocking on the door of the S tier. So then we're going to go to Man's Search for Meaning. And when we're talking about the S tier, one of the greatest self-help books of all time, Man's Search for Meaning is taking its place right there. This is a brilliant book. Split into two, really. The first part is Viktor Frankl's experiences of living in a Nazi concentration camp, I think from 1942 to 1944 or 45, and the lessons he learned from that. And the second part is going into his theory, which is called logotherapy. So the second part is more academic, the first part is more storytelling. But throughout, it's brilliant. And the main insight he draws, which has the power to change your life, is that we're not seeking happiness and we're not seeking power. What man really needs, and when I say man, I obviously mean women as well, is meaning. They have to create a meaning for their life. And you can do this in three ways, I think Frankl says: through your work, through love, or wanting to bear your suffering and what you're going through in dignity. So this is an incredibly powerful book. It's an insight like no other into some of the worst conditions that any human throughout history will have experienced, and how he was able to survive and how he was able to create a meaning for his life. This should be recommended reading for everyone. You will not be disappointed. Then we move on to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I was really surprised at this book. I was not looking forward to reading it. It's a book on relationships. I haven't covered many books on relationships in either in this video or the one before, but this one was a really interesting read. He shares many anecdotes. The author, who I can't remember his name off the top of my head, has been a relationship expert for years, runs seminars on relationships, and this is his condensed wisdom. And it should come with a trigger warning for people reading it in 2024, because he has a very different view of gender and sexes, in that he thinks there are very distinct characteristics between genders and sexes, between the genders and sexes, and you have to treat men and women differently because there are fundamental differences. I happen to agree with most of what he writes in his book. I was entertained by his examples and shocked in a good way by his insights. I wasn't expecting him to be so astute and so clear in his thinking. And also, his advice, I think, is good. I've used some of it in my own relationship. I find that it helps. It's a little repetitive. It's a medium-sized book. It could probably be smaller because he makes the same points again and again. But it's good. I could go A or B on this. It could go in either. Relationship books don't tend to be what fascinates me, though, so I'll go with B, but that's just a personal preference. Understand that could easily be in the A tier. Right, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. This is a book, I think, written way back in the 1960s. Maxwell Maltz was a plastic surgeon by trade, and the book is all about self-image and identity. Don't be fooled by the title. I think this is probably the worst title of a popular self-help book I've ever seen. psycho-cybernetics. It makes you think you're learning something about computers. But his whole idea is that the brain, the mind, operates as a computer, and if you give it clear instructions, it will carry them out. But it's more in depth than that, because it goes into self-image and identities and how we tend to conform to our self-image. So you can think positively, but if you don't have a positive self-image, all that positive thinking, all those affirmations you're doing aren't going to make a whole lot of difference unless you can change the way you see yourself. I mean, this is a really revolutionary insight. And if you've been someone who's been reading self-help books for years, you've been on your personal development journey for years, and you've been thinking that you've been thinking positively, repeating affirmations, but not really seeing a huge amount of changes in your life, this could be why. You may need to look at your self-image and your identity. And there's no better book to help you do that than Psycho-Cybernetics. It's going in the A category for me. But again, like Can't Hurt Me, it's knocking on the door of that S tier. Start with Why by Simon Sinek. So this is more of a business book or understanding how to promote yourself. His concept is that you've got to know what your why is and communicate your why. It's actually based off a TED Talk, which I think is brilliant. I think Simon Sinek's talk about this concept, Start With Why, is the best TED Talk I've ever seen. It doesn't quite translate into the book, though. He uses lots of interesting examples, talks about Apple a lot, talks about Martin Luther King, really good examples, well written, but it's not quite as entertaining and engaging as his TED Talk was. Also, I think the insight is a little bit of a fallacy. He comes up with a great theory. He backs it with some, not scientific research conducted on his theory, but scientific research conducted on other areas. I think research into the brain. So it all sounds really good, but I don't think it really holds up in practice. I implemented his ideas and saw pretty much zero difference. So I'm going to go with the B category with Start With Why. Still a good book, still worth reading. Now, The Alchemist. Now, I think on some measures, this is the most popular self-help book of all time. I know you could perhaps call it a spiritual book as well. So it sort of borders across both of those categories. I think it's sold around 65 million copies, maybe more by now. Many people cite this as the book that inspired them to pursue and follow their dreams. So I read it with such high expectations, but I was a little disappointed the first time I read it. I found the story not very engaging. It was okay, not as engaging as, for example, the Celestine Prophecy. It's another one of those books that teaches you through a story. I'm reading it currently for a second time, enjoying it more, but I just can't see what the hype is about. I'm really sorry if that's the case and this is your favorite book of all time. Maybe you can tell me in the comment section below what I'm missing, what it is about this book which is so powerful. I could put it in the C category, but I like the concept. I like the idea of following your dreams. It's a great idea, and I think we should all do that. So I'm going to go with B. The Chimp Paradox. Now, I read this with real high hopes. It's a book about self-sabotage, or it purports to be a book about self-sabotage. And what a good concept to have a book about, because I think we all feel that we get in our own way sometimes, and the monkey mind ruins all our best plans. And I've certainly experienced that. I'm have been a huge self-sabotager in the past. So I was really fascinated to read this book, but I just thought it was complete garbage, just completely boring, zero insights, amazingly, for a book that promised so much. And the only thing I found interesting was his scientific explanation of how the different parts of the brain. That was it. I took nothing else from it. Everything seemed so basic and obvious. And I don't have a scientific background in the actual brain. My background is more with working with the mind through my hypnotherapy. But I knew all of his insights already, and not because I think I am a huge genius, but because they were so basic, they were so such common sense. I thought I'm getting absolutely nothing from this book. It's one of the few books I didn't finish because I just got so bored with it. And I have a problem with that because I have this thing in my mind that I have to finish a book, even if I don't like it. I mentioned the 5-second rule in the last video and how that got a D, was placed in the D category. I finished that book. I couldn't finish The Chimp Paradox. It's going in the D category. Really nothing there at all for me. Maybe if you enjoyed that book, again, tell me what I'm missing. Now, The One Thing by Gary Keller. This is more of a business book in the same sort of ilk as Start With Why. But for me, this was much better than Start With Why. Really good book on productivity, getting the most out of yourself or your business and looking at the things that are irrelevant, the areas which aren't making an impact and cutting them out and focusing on what really moves the needle when it comes to getting things done. I love the concept of the one thing. Just focus on one thing per day, get that done. Work in time blocks, 4-hour time blocks. Get your thing done and then move on to the next thing, or do the less important tasks after that. Have one thing for the year that you're going to get done. I love this type of thinking. Engaging, interesting book. Goes solidly in the A category. Right, The Power of Positive Thinking. Norman Vincent Peale. Anyway, the book itself is good. It's not fantastic. It's sort of in a similar vein to The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And if you have to read between the two, if you had to choose between the two, I'd go with The Power of Subconscious Mind every time. Yes, there is a religious element to this book, but he sort of weaves Bible quotes and Bible insights into modern day living, or what was back in the 50s or 60s modern day living. And it's good, it's interesting, it's helpful. It's just not as powerful as The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And he delves a bit too much into religion for my liking at various parts of the book. I could give this a B or a C. Is it better than The Alchemist? It probably is, actually. So that's difficult. It's not as good as Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. This is difficult to grade. I'm going to put it in the C category. I'm going to move The Alchemist down to the C category as well. Okay, so then we're going to go to The Purpose-Driven Life. Now, you may be wondering, unless you are a devout Christian, you may be wondering, what the hell is this book? I've never heard of it. And I'd never heard of it, but apparently it's sold 35 million copies or thereabouts. It's one of the most most best-selling self-help or spiritual books of all time. But if you're not religious, you're not missing anything. I found this very boring. I found it too entrenched in Christianity. The degrees that The Power of Your Subconscious Mind and the Power of Positive Thinking are entrenched in Christianity, for me, are absolutely fine. I'm not a Christian, and I don't have any issue with the way they discuss the Bible or explain certain passages or phrases in the Bible. I actually find it quite fascinating and enjoyed that. This, though, the Purpose-Driven Life, goes way too far in that direction. For me, as a non-Christian, it was boring. I didn't really get any insights from it at all. Obviously, the purpose is supposed to be given to you by God. That is how you find your purpose, through God, who's going to tell you what your purpose is, which I don't agree with. So I can't give this anything but a D. And if you're not a devout Christian, I don't think you're missing out by skipping that book. Who Moved My Cheese? So it's another book in the shape of, or in the context of, An Alchemist or the Celestine Prophecy, in that the author is telling a story, a very brief story, to get you to think about an insight. And obviously, in this case, the insight is about change, how we should embrace change. Great insight, great message, how when bad things appear to happen to us, say we lose our job, it can actually lead to a greater life if you're ready and prepared to embrace change. So great message, told in a very basic story about silly little mice in a maze who want some cheese, and funny characters called Hem and Haw. And it's just, to me, very childish, And I don't think it's specifically written for children. I think it got popular being shared around in companies and businesses and corporations for how people should embrace change. The only thing that saves this from a D is that the concept of the book is good, and it's a book about change, which is useful. So I'm going to put it in the C category. Okay, You Can Heal Your Life, Louise Hay. Now, another classic, another book which has sold in excess of 30 or maybe even 40, maybe it's 50 million copies. Great story, Louise Hay. Started off, had a very difficult upbringing. I think she was sexually abused, became a model, and then got cancer and healed herself from the cancer, which is absolutely incredible. And I do believe in that. I do believe that the mind plays a role in your healing. So it's great to have a bold book like this talking about how the mind can do that. In terms of a book, it was written in the early 1980s. It wasn't the most engaging read for me. And I really had an issue with one section, one chapter, which said that certain emotions reveal themselves as certain illnesses. So if somebody is particularly an angry person, they're going to have a problem with their gallbladder. I don't know if that's completely the right example, but I'm giving you an idea that, how she linked certain emotions to certain illnesses. And I think that's nonsense. I really think that's nonsense. And if if you write something like that in the book, it immediately damages the credibility of the book, which is a shame, because I think there is a lot of value in talking about how you can heal yourself through the mind-body connection. So this, for me, could have easily been an A if it was a bit more entertaining, and could have been a B without that section on the certain emotions creating certain illnesses and diseases. So I'm going to have to put it in the C category. I understand some people love this book, and I understand why. The parts of it that are excellent, but a couple of bits that just don't mesh with me. Right, finally, 12 Rules for Life, Jordan Peterson. So this, again, is one of the more modern books. It's slightly different, more of a philosophical book, but they are rules for life. It is guidance for how you should live your life. Each of the rules has a funny little title or explanation, like go and stroke a cat in the street, or stand up straight with your shoulders back. I mean, there's obviously a deeper meaning behind them, which he explains well. Jordan Peterson is an odd character. He's a good writer. He's really a real deep thinker, and he presents some insights that are actually quite fascinating, but he's also very flawed in his insights, and he's also just straight up wrong on a lot of occasions as well. So throughout the book, he talks about how life is suffering, and this is not a good message you want to live with. Life is not suffering. Yep, suffering can be a part of life and is probably a part of everybody's life. That doesn't mean that life is suffering. I think his whole life is suffering credo came from the fact that he lived in, I think it's Alberta, Canada, where it was frozen for 8 months of the year and there wasn't much to do, and he was miserable living there. So, I mean, that's fine. That's his experience, though. It's not everybody's experience. That's not somebody living in California who has wonderful weather, or living in the Mediterranean. They don't need to hear this. They don't need to be brought down by Jordan Peterson's message that life is suffering. Having said that, he is, I would say, a bit of a genius thinker. Some brilliant insights. He leans too heavily on mythology, and that gets a little boring. So it could go in the A category for his insights and his writing, but I'm going to put him in the B category because he's just wrong on a few things and he leans on mythology too much. So there you have it. There's the tier list. Only Man's Search for Meaning got into the S level for this one, although Can't Hurt Me and Psycho Cybernetics were knocking on the door. They were very close. Right, just for a little bit of fun, I will now grade my 4 books. Now, these are in order from which I wrote them. Now, this doesn't mean that I think they are S tier worthy or A or B or even D tier worthy. None of them are D tier worthy. Let's get that point across right now. And I wouldn't want to grade my own books in that way. It's not for me to do that. It's for somebody else to do that. I'm simply comparing them against each other. Which of my 4 books do I think is the best? which is the worst? Start with my first one, Escape the System. It's probably closest to my heart. I'm going to put this as my second best book. I felt most inspired while writing this. Some passages I look back on and think, wow, how did I do that? I just sort of reeled it off. I just channeled it and wrote it, which is not what I tend to do now. I tend to be a little more meticulous, and I think the book is good for that. I think it's got a nice flow to it. And I feel some people say it's a bit like, reading a novel or watching a movie. It kind of takes you on a journey, which is exactly what I wanted to do with it. The only maybe downside to it is it was my first book, so I feel I'm a much better writer now. But that is probably my favorite book. It's got a fond place in my heart. The Personal Freedom Manifesto is not my second book. It's my third book. So why is it there? Right. Do the Work You Love is my second book, and I will rate this number 3. It started off as a blog post. I was only answering a reply to a comment on one of my YouTube videos. The guy was saying, how do you create an income without working a boring job? And that's basically the book. How do you do the work you love? It's my ideas, my concepts of how you grade your passions, how you figure out what it is you want to do for your life, and then there are 3 paths to making it happen. I enjoyed writing it. I think it works well as a concept, as a book. I don't think it's quite as exciting as Escape the System, and that's why it gets the number 3 slot. The Personal Freedom Manifesto, not that I think it's a C book, I think it's better than that, but for my books, it's the weakest of my 4 books. It's more of an accompaniment to Escape the System. It adds on to where Escape the System finished off. It gives you a few more practical examples of Escape the System about how to live your dreams. There's some really what I think are fascinating stories and insights from my personal life and things I've observed in there. So I think it's a good book, but it's not a standalone. It doesn't have the power of Escape the System. It doesn't have a nicely woven concept like Do the Work You Love. So this obviously means that The Rebel Code, for me, I think is my best book. It's my most recent one. My writing powers are at their strongest. The concept is good. It's for rebels. The idea is there are 3 types of people in this world: leaders, followers, and rebels. And if you are a rebel, this is your playbook. This is your guide to how you're going to succeed in life, because life for rebels is tough, and we need that guide. There aren't many books out there for us. So there are 12 steps. I think I thought the 12 steps out well. I think they're not only theoretically good, I think if you apply them to your life, they are really going to help. And I also think the book has some of the inspiration that Escape the System has as well. So for me, that's my order that I feel my books are in. Doesn't necessarily mean that's how I'd grade them, because I don't think it's my job to grade them. So that's my list. It's all done. I finished this subject. As I said, if you want to watch part 2, look in the description below. There will be a link. If you enjoyed the video, please like it so that it can help improve the algorithm and maybe get out to more people. And let me know if you disagreed with any of my rankings. Let me know why The Alchemist should be higher, or why the Chimp Paradox shouldn't be a D, because maybe I missed something when I didn't read all of the book. But those are my thoughts. Please do comment your thoughts below. Continue watching. Subscribe to the channel so you can get the next video. And I will see you in the next one.